So the recording goes on YouTube as a not a private file, but an unlisted video.
Right.
So it's only people that actually get given the link, and we add it to a playlist.
Right.
So it is accessible for people outside of the program, but it's not.
Don't have to go looking.
Yeah, we're not actively promoting it. So. We did look at turning it into. But we discussed that with a few people who come to speak, and and promoting it like a podcast.
Yeah.
They do several things, insights in that they gave that they wouldn't have given if it had been promoted that way.
Right. Yeah.
Kia ora, how are you all?
Hi.
Kia ora, Shakir, how are you?
Good. Good. How are you?
Good, good. We were waiting on that last session then, and we got shut down. We got kicked out.
Seems like it's coming back.
Yeah. Kia ora, Ryan, how are you? What's on the tasty lunch today, Ryan?
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
So hungry now.
Send me some of that in this direction.
No, it's burnt. It's not a good time. It's fine. It's okay. I'm grateful.
Kia ora, Michael.
Hello. Hi, Donna. Hi,
Hi.
everyone.
Beauty's got a camera shot. You want to come and sit here?
No, I'm fine.
No? I think you can be famous.
Wait,
Come on.
I like hiding.
We'll give it another few minutes to see who arrives. Are you feeling guilty that we're all here hungry and you're there filling your face?
I don't really want to watch. It's not so much you guys being hungry, it's I don't want you to watch me eat. Specifically.
That Ren, she's a really messy eater, isn't she? Thank goodness you had the microphone off. Kia ora, Ness, how are you? You were just too late to witness Ren's fantastic lunch.
I'm sorry to hear that. Kia ora.
We'll give it another couple of minutes to see who's coming in. Was that all your notes just from the last session, Shaked? There's going to be a rainforest gone by the time you finish this program, if that's the case.
There's a pile of all sorts of papers and things from who knows when, which it's interesting stuff, looking at it and putting it in different piles, figuring out what I'm ever going to look at again and what should be composted.
Okay, let's get started. Whoever joins us part way. We would normally start our session with a short proverb or whakatauki to open up, and then we'll do a round of intros so you get to know who's in the room, and then we'll come to you. So today's whakatauki, haere takamua takamuri, kuia e whai, which the translation I've got here is about being a leader, not a follower. Yeah, so that's very appropriate given that we've got Startup Dunedin's chief starter with us today. Yeah, to talk about starting new things and taking a lead there. But before we start, let's go around the room and do our normal intros of who we are and what's the change we think we might be or we are currently working on. So, who would like to go first? Go on, Ness. You've got the microphone already.
Damn it. I mean, kia ora. Kia ora, my name's Ness. I live in Te Whanganui, Atara, Wellington. And what I'm working on with this course is around building myself and my skills and capability to work with inclusion and community and how to best support those kind of projects. So really honouring Te Tiriti and looking for that future perspective of what that could look like with support. That's all from me. Look forward to hearing you talk today.
Kia ora, Ness. Ren, your next one along on the screen here.
Kia ora, koutou. I'm Ren, obviously. People have already seen me eating. I am a community practitioner. I live in Tamaki Makaurau and work in East Tamaki mostly. And I'm working on the project that I'm focusing on for this, for my study is lowering the harmful effects of alcohol.
Kia ora. There's some funny bloke next along called Ray O'Brien, who's apparently skip him. No, apparently he's working on changes in education so that it's more focused on learners being able to make a difference to the world being a better place. Steffi, you're next up.
Hello, I'm Steffi. I'm based in Christchurch. I'm interested in learning spaces where people can get insights into unfamiliar and in particular shifts in how they relate to someone else or something else. And so at the moment I'm working with the church over my back fence around how they relate to the physical place that they find themselves.
Awesome. And this room here is the next window, so it's over to you, Mo. You might want to stick your head into the camera.
So I'm looking at functional fashion and how that can work with sustainability, looking at talent and ancient way of practices, and how your clothes can last longer, basically.
Great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Shaked, you're next.
Hi, yeah, my name is Shaked. I've just started the program early this month. I'm based in Thames, outside of Thames. And yeah, I think at that stage of the program, I'm kind of starting really to figuring out really and trying to understand how my family kind of focus, which is around living and sharing regenerative life, is connected to a wider impact kind of process.
Kia ora. Julie, how are you?
Kia ora koutou. Ko Julie tōku ingoa. My area of interest is in dance and movement and the power of dance and movement to create transformation and healing and connection, and also self-expression. And I'm also part of a group of people working towards creating a centre for socio-ecological change.
Kia ora.
From now,
Michael next.
Yeah, hey Donna, how are you? I'm interested in social entrepreneurship, which is just being able to make a change, but also make a dollar. So I'm interested in the kind of cross in between. So I'm at a unpaid internship at the moment for a company that's sparked my interest, a startup in Australia, working remotely. I'm not actually in Australia. Yeah, they're looking at doing a global sustainability fund. Their name is Sponsorty, and they're trying to find a new way to get money back into the community rather than just go to the big corporations, which will eventually starve us all.
Excellent. Kia ora, Michael. And last but certainly not least, we've got Philippa.
Hi, I'm in the process of moving house today, so after this I will go off Zoom, but my video won't be off, but I will be listening. So my name is Philippa Holmes. I'm based in Tamaki Makaurau. I guess I've got lots of different streams that I work on through life, particularly based around community development and social impact. I just finished a really big project called a Social Impact Summit in Auckland through my social enterprise, and and actually working on a strategic plan today to get out for a Life Learners National Trust and do some work within the gaming community, and bunch of different things. I'm trying to work on rewording my elevator pitch right now, so this is timely because it's definitely not working.
Depends how big the building is, doesn't it? Great. So that's the group that's here today on a range of leadership for change. So the bachelors, grad dip, sustainable practice, grad dip professional practice. Don't think we'll get anybody who's on masters yet today. But yeah, so pretty diverse bunch of people and different projects. So I'd like to introduce Donna Hall to you. And Donna's job is Chief Starter at Startup Dunedin. So who's Donna and how did you end up at Startup Dunedin?
Ooh, right. Kia ora koutou. As Ray alluded to, I'm Donna and I am the Chief Starter at Startup Dunedin. How did I end up at Startup Dunedin? That's a very, very good question. I arrived there in January of this year and I spent 3 months pondering that very thing. How did I end up there? My background is I left school at 16. Didn't really enjoy the structure. And worked in a factory. So after working in a factory and picking asparagus, I realised physical labour was not for me, and ended up working my way into an administration role. By the way, by the time I was 22, I was working for an accounting practice, and it was around the time that accounting software was coming to the fore. So previously everybody had handwritten everything and it was all very manual, and so the likes of SME products like MYOB were on the market. So I was very into that scene, and I really, really enjoyed technology. So for 20 odd years, I worked in that space. So as a business advisor. During that time, I had started my own internet service provider with my ex-husband, my now ex-husband. That's a story in itself, working with a partner. And yeah, so had been involved in the startup ecosystem for a number of years. I'm on a committee with Ray, so we make sure Startup Weekend runs every year. I was facilitating a Startup Dunedin program called Co-Starters, so I'd done that for a few years. And as an outsider looking in, so my previous role was a manager in an advisory firm, so a decent sized local advisory firm. I was seeing this momentum being gained by the startup community, and the role was advertised towards the end of last year, and I just thought, how can I really kind of make changes en masse for people, essentially. So advisory services are very, very expensive. When I left Pulse & Higgs, I was charged out at $300 an hour. It is not really, you know, achievable for a lot of people to be able to engage people at that really, really early stage. So when that role came up, I was kind of pondering life and my values, and I was like, this is a way that I could transition into a role where I could help people every day, but also I wanted to get away from advisory and more into that general management as well. So that's kind of how I ended up there. A big long journey.
Can I confirm we're not on Pulse & Higgs rates today?
And what do you mean, sorry?
$300 an hour.
$300 an hour?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's that?
It's been a lovely session. Thank you very much.
I don't work here anymore.
Thank you, Ray. Bye.
I'm on the city call now.
Right. So you hit on a whole load of different topics in there on that, and I hope you don't mind me sharing. You're working towards your MPP.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
So this next question might be a topical one for you just now. If Chief Starter is your job just now,
yes.
What's your profession?
What is my profession? That's an interesting one. I'm a business manager essentially. That is the profession I'm in, I suppose.
So what makes you different from any other business manager? Because there's a lot of themes in there that not all business managers would talk about.
Interesting. So what, can you repeat that question?
Yeah, so what makes you different from other business managers? Because you spoke about your values driving things, being able to help people, being able to make changes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a whole load of things in the mix there and different things in your background that are not the same as every business manager.
Yes.
So what's the difference in your mix?
Probably with me, I'm very altruistic in my outlook. I have very strong beliefs, and I want things to be fair and just, and I want a wide range of people to have access to the services that we provide. So that's probably a little bit different to a normal business manager role where you're really focusing on profit potentially, although we are a not-for-profit trust, but you know, at the end of the day it is about building a sustainable organisation, but it's very, very important to me that we remain focused on our ecosystem and sort of ensuring that we're doing the best by the founders.
Great. So you've touched on the Startup Dunedin and the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about Startup Dunedin, your place over there at Distiller, and how it all works?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it'll be the angle, I guess, of looking at that is we've got a lot of people on the screen and in the room who might have ideas, that they want to turn into reality. So how does a startup ecosystem work?
Okay, this might be a bit of a big spiel, but so Startup Dunedin is founded and funded by the Dunedin City Council, the University of Otago, and the Otago Polytechnic. So they provide us with some cash, they provide us with a building. So we have a building not too far from the hub in Dunedin, where we provide very early stage space for people starting up. Now, we are essentially about job creation is what it comes down to, but we do that by running programs essentially. So we run 4 different programs, so Audacious, so that's students starting up. So if you're in Dunedin, I would suggest that's something that you look into doing. So, and that's more about entrepreneurship as a skill set. So you can come along with an idea, or you can come along with no idea and just be dabbling in some of the skills that we teach in relation to starting a business. We run a program called Co-Starters, which is a 9-week business program. And that could be anybody on that course, like the man in the van, you know, like an electrician. It could be someone that has got this amazing idea that's going to be global. So it really sits across a wide variety of people. We have a accelerator called the Challenger Series. So that's for our scale-ups, so businesses that are a little bit further along and are looking to go offshore or looking for investment. And we work with them for 6 months of the year. So we only take 3 challenges a year, and there's cash prizes, etc. associated with that. So, and so the last program we have is the Distiller Incubator. So we have a physical space. We're really, really lucky in Dunedin. We have this thriving ecosystem, and part of our ecosystem is there is a number of co-working spaces in Dunedin. And one of our kind of thoughts as a board is that we will never compete with people. So if there's a commercial business that is doing what we're doing, we're going to step out of that space. So the Distiller was a co-working space. It now is basically a building for people on our programs. And one of our programs is called the Distiller Incubator, and it's a very light touch program. And it's kind of where we put people, if they're very, very serious, post a program, or we guide them into a program. So it's a sort of like a holding pattern, essentially.
Right.
Did that cover your question?
Yeah, that's good. So in terms of on each of those programs,
yep,
what are the capabilities that you're developing so that someone with a good idea
yep,
is much more likely to successfully turn that idea into some action and some impact?
Yeah. So the skills that you're learning, so we all, startup, it has become very trendy, so startup terminology and all that jazz, MVP and UVP and all those sort of things. But my take on it is people have been starting businesses for hundreds of years, and a lot of it's just common sense. But we do work with a tool which is an A3, like a lean business canvas. So typically with any of our programs, Challenger is the exception because they're further along, we're always starting to kind of look at the problem and make sure there's actually a problem. And then we kind of move on to the solution and you kind of, and your customer, and you start building out your UVP, your unique value proposition. The skills that we try and install as well is a little bit of the basics around the legalities of running a business or an organisation. We look at the fun stuff, the accounting. There's always a drop-off on accounting night. We look at legal as well, so IP, those sort of things. But most of it is really just a taster. So it's giving people the tools to really go away and really formulate their idea. We don't do it for you. You know, it's about leading you in the right direction, not dissimilar to what Ray does on a day-to-day basis.
So you describe it as an ecosystem.
Yes.
Yeah. Why do you think that's an appropriate metaphor for what you do?
I mean, I think it's about that collaboration and that community. Yeah. And again, it's the current favoured term for startup. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like it's an industry term.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you ever think of it more deeply as an ecosystem?
As its own unique organism growing and exploding. Yes. Yeah, at times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What are the main challenges that people coming to you with an idea face?
So mostly is they have no idea where to start. You know, they've got this great idea and they think they're going to take on the world, but they just don't actually know where to start. A lot of people have ideas that haven't been validated. So validation is a key kind of component to any kind of business idea, understanding if there's an actual need for what you're trying to produce.
Before you go further, can I get you to explain validation and what it might look like a little bit further?
Yeah.
It's definitely a startup term.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
See, I've been there 8 months now. It's sinking into me. So validating is when you actually go out and you're talking to people. So talking to your end user or your customer would be the word we'd use. So really, really understanding that, or understanding how they're solving the problem that they have, and how your problem solving might be a bit more unique, and understanding that your solution is really kind of fly essentially once you go to market. Sorry, that was a bit of a...
So it's not necessarily full-blown market research and statistics and data. It's getting out and just...
With the absolute basics, what we do these days, keeping in mind that we might have upward of 300 people come through our programs a year at the moment, we say go away and talk to 100 customers. Talk to 100 people about, where they see the problem you're trying to solve in the world, and understand, how they prioritize some of the solutions or outcomes that you are trying to implement.
Yeah. So validation of an idea.
Yep.
That's something that might actually fit quite neatly into, say, one of our year 2 courses.
Yep.
Yeah, where it's a project or a negotiated learning.
Yep.
And doing that scoping and
Yep.
validation. So
Yep.
so when someone goes off, or a group of people go off with their idea, they speak to 100 people.
Yep.
And they get all of those insights, all of that data really.
Yeah.
How do you help them decipher whether that validates their idea or not?
Sometimes it's actually just very, very obvious.
Yeah.
When you're speaking to people. I mean, one of the key skills we also try to install in people is how you ask questions. So making sure that you're not leading people to the answer that you want. And that's really, really important. You don't ask your friends either, because they lie. No, they don't. They don't necessarily lie, but they're not gonna, they're gonna be very, very kind in their answer. So it's making sure you're reaching people that would actually be your end user. I think it's a natural, it's an organic process. Once you've got that information, it just becomes clearer and clearer whether your current solution is the right one, or whether 50 of those people said you need X, so you're going to pivot to that X.
Pivot.
You're going to change your idea. You're going to tweak it slightly to meet the need of your end user.
Yeah.
Pivot is very American.
Oh,
No.
the whole thing is that, yes.
For new starters, they use it, especially in the computer industry, where you start a program, it fails, then you pivot.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think there's a few different definitions of pivot, but the best one I've found that fits my way of thinking is that the end objective stays the same. The path of getting there has just changed.
Changes, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's not that you're completely scrapping and walking away from your idea.
No.
You just find a different way to do that.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
in New Zealand, the failure is not accepted widely. You've always been told your end result should be achieved.
Yeah.
So, if you don't, it's like a failure and you're dead.
Yeah.
So pivoting is such a way of saying, let's look at other avenues, I guess, to get there.
I think you've touched on a really solid theme in the whole startup thing, and that what is the proportion of from startup ideas through to things that become a reality to those that are actually successful? What's that funnel like?
It gets very narrow.
Yeah.
Very, very narrow.
Are we talking about 1 in 100 or?
Oh. If we're talking specifically about our startups, you would be 1 in probably 100. Yeah. Become truly successful businesses. I mean, we're all looking. Well, that's not fair. Become scalable, exportable businesess. There's a lot of value to be had by the man in the van. And that might not necessarily be a run on the board for Startup Dunedin in the sense that we are looking for businesses that are going to employ a large number of people. But I think there's a huge amount of value that is often missed in self-employment.
So with that really narrow funnel
Yes.
of what, as Mo's suggested, is interpreted as success,
Yes.
and then there's all of these other people in the funnel and
Yeah.
other teams in the funnel that, depending on your paradigm on life, are either a success or a failure.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you help them?
So the people that have failed, essentially.
Oh.
I mean, in the same way that we help people that are deemed successful.
Yeah.
You know, it's providing support, providing a sounding board. You know, you talk about another startup term, failing fast. Some of these programs really get to the point where you invalidate your idea really, really quickly. And, you know, that's a good outcome. You haven't spent $200,000 and 20 years, 6 months trying to do something. You do it really, really quickly. You know, and that's cool. We see ourselves as a safe place for founders, so we can have those tough conversations, and we do have them. We say, look, you know, you pros and cons. It actually comes down to that quite often. Tell me why you want to continue, why do you want to keep flogging this, or why you want to fail. You know, pull the pin, and people often come to their own conclusion that it isn't for them for whatever reason.
Yeah. I think that invalidating your idea is a really key concept.
Yeah.
I think probably everybody on the screen here, or maybe Shaked hasn't yet, yeah, but their ideas that they came to Leadership for Change with,
yeah, has
changed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to some extent that's a bit of a startup mentality of being able to do that pivot, to do that change.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some of the changes that we talk about in this group are not necessarily fail fast.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm interested in getting your thoughts on where's the edges of where startup methodology, startup systems, startup thinking could work. Because if we look at addressing big issues like inequities in society, yeah, or people's perceptions about race, yeah, if you will fail fast, you'll fail straight away, and you'll have made no change.
Yeah.
And you have to keep failing for many years before you make some change.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where's the limits of what startup can address?
Oh, that's an interesting one.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, the startup methodology is just a set of tools to, you know, really make it really, really simple and clear when you're working through an idea. I don't necessarily think it's always the right methodology for everybody, depending on what you're doing. You know, because if you worked the way that we suggest you work, and you're being told no all the time, you know, maybe you fail too fast. You know, it's all kind of, I think, relative to what you're trying to achieve, I think. Yeah.
So I'd like to pass over to the group here, because I think maybe having listened to what you said and knowing their own ideas well, they might have some questions for you to tap into your font of knowledge.
Sure.
Anybody got a question for Donna? Yep, Ness right in the middle there.
Kia ora. Yeah, this is kind of like a more big picture question, but a frustration that I have personally within the startup ecosystem is I feel like it's isolated to a certain personality type. The founder, the entrepreneur, maybe the extrovert, you know, going and speaking to 100 people doesn't actually meet a lot of personality types, because it's quite a fearful thing to do, as well as having an idea, you know, thinking of that. And I feel like it's kind of idolized in a way. And I guess my question is kind of around what kind of support or engagement do you have for other people and other personality types who also want to work for purpose and values and things that matter? Or what kind of other initiatives do you think are there out there that support the wider population?
Yeah. So interestingly, when I started at Startup Dunedin, I feel like often there's a perception it's a bit of a club. You know, there's you're right, a certain personality type. There's there's a group of people that live, eat, breathe this startup methodology and entrepreneurship. But you and I both know it's wider than that. So we make sure that we are open to everybody. So we have an absolute mix of extroverts and introverts. There's many ways to get to the end result without having to put yourself out in front of 100 people, presenting, pitching for money, whatever you might be doing, So we are keenly aware of the perception of that startup community, and again, we try and be as inclusive as we can be. Does that answer your question?
Are you thinking about the other places in Dunedin as well? That they all have their own different culture of how things work, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, all the different startup spaces have a different flavour.
Yeah, definitely.
If you want to find anything out about startup spaces in Wellington, Ness is in person.
Perfect.
Yeah. Ness spent a year desk surfing around every free desk she could for a year.
Oh, good on you. Well, you're more than welcome to use ours if you come to Dunedin.
Thank you. Yeah, I get, the personality thing I think is a big one, especially because I find these spaces aren't so inclusive to lots of different people. And I also question about why 1 in 100 startups actually get to go into some scalable business when maybe they're not addressing the fact that they need some other personality types in there to turn them into reality rather than just this idea go-getter thing. And I also question why it's still such a popular initiative when maybe it's better to support some of the ideas that didn't go through because they didn't have those other support pathways.
Okay, cool. So there's several points to that. So one of the things that we do in Co-Starters is that we do a lot of work on looking at the team, the wider team. So they sort of suggest that a single founder is much more likely to fail for that reason. You're one person, you have one sort of set of preferences, and it might not be enough to cover, a broad spectrum of skill sets. So again, it's kind of hard. Some people just aren't coachable. They don't want to work with another person, so they're going to just fail by design. The people that kind of recognise that, for example, at the moment, I'm working with a gentleman called Chris Hilder. So Chris Hilder he's an inventor. He's like a backyard inventor, and he invented an at-home coffee roaster. Now he is a computer scientist. He isn't interested in talking to people. He just literally wants to tinker. Okay, that's all he wants to do. He's an inventor, but he's got this great scalable business. But he needs to realise that you have to bring, you get to a point where you actually have to bring in other people to move forward. Is what it comes down to. So Cafe Logic with a K, have a look. It's very cool. He's one of our Challenger series participants at the moment. Did that answer? You had 3 sort of main aspects to it. So please ask again if I didn't quite cover that off. Yeah.
And do you help build community around the country with startups?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Did you? Hello.
Ness, did you have a follow-on or?
I think, yeah, just those kind of questions are always in my head when I go to any of these startup events. And I think it's around the events or meet people. And I'm like, everything feels very familiar in terms of the personalities. So yeah, it's just a question of inclusion. And I don't expect there isn't necessarily an answer. I guess I'm trying to be provocative.
That's cool. I feel the same way. I absolutely feel the same way. I am an extrovert, but can't stand public speaking and or networking. I find it really, really difficult. I go to these events. I often feel like I'm excluded, particularly because I'm a female as well, which is weird. I don't know what that's about. That might be my own.
Patriarchy.
But yeah, I definitely understand. But I also sometimes have to step back and realise that everyone is in the same boat, and people that we perceive to be confident and self-assured and bulletproof might be struggling the same way I am when I walk into a room and I feel uncomfortable. So I think sometimes with that reality check in my mind, I feel a lot more comfortable in the room. I mean, the people in the startup space in New Zealand, to me, are really, really overwhelming. Like I've gone to events in Auckland and I've just actually felt tiny and just wanted to run from the room. Like, it's just the reality. I think we've just got to all just stand up and get stuck in. Yeah.
Yeah. Red, you were about to ask a question as well?
Ness has another cool question, which might be my question. I don't know. Oh yeah, mine's a question. I actually did I did co-starters in Auckland.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed it. The 9-week course.
Yeah.
And I did it for, if anyone in here remembers my goodness gathering project, whatever that is. And so it's it was a not-for-profit. It was like a fundraiser, actually. It's and we were looking at maybe kind of monetizing, what we were already doing. So we had already created this online kind of global fundraiser that happened every 6 months, and we were looking at ways to kind of create it into having a social arm and then a business arm in a way, and it didn't come into fruition. We're one of the 99 but not in a it didn't, because we kind of lost a bit of passion for it or whatever. So I don't, it's not the course's fault, it's not whatever. But when I was when I was doing the course, I really enjoyed it, and I've lived overseas in a couple of continents, and I kind of because where did it originate? Is it America? Sorry?
In Chattanooga in the States. I think it's Illinois, maybe. Yeah.
And I kind of I enjoyed it, but I had lived in North America and I had actually just come back, and I was like, this is a bit like there. I kind of had that feel. And we'd go through the sessions, the workbook and stuff, and would be and not, I'm not telling on them, but the facilitators would be a bit let's not do that one. And that's not super relevant. So, which is cool because things weren't.
Yeah.
But I kind of, and I gave the feedback at the time, because this is over a year ago.
Yeah.
And I was this isn't relevant, and it's in the workbook, and we're not doing it because it's not relevant. So maybe there should be a tweaked one, a tweaked version for Kiwis, or and that was that kind of that was my takeaway in a way. I was I did this really cool course, but it was kind of American, it was kind of not quite for us.
Yeah.
So, and I think around what Ness is saying, and around, and also around the women inclusion of because when I was living in Vancouver, I was living with this wicked as go-getter Vancouver, she had grown up in Toronto, but she was she had this startup, and I'm just it's an amazing idea, and she is so cool and got so much charisma and so much energy, and if anyone could make it happen, because it's a huge idea,
yeah,
she could. And I'm watching her from here now because we're still friends and stuff. And it's so hard. I can see how hard it is. And we talk sometimes and she's like, fuck this. Like, she's like, every now and then we have a chat and she's like, and so we talked, and she's actually like, she's one of those introverted but can be extroverted if she needs to be kind of people. And she worked in sales and she was awesome. And she said to me, she went to a Tony Robbins. She was like,
oh really?
She was like, I hate Tony Robbins, but I'm going to go because I need to be that person.
Yeah.
And that was her thing. And Ness is shaking her head because that's bullshit. But she knows, like my friend, and it is. And Sam, my friend, Samantha, she knows that it's bullshit, that you should have to change or whatever. But she's going in these startup spaces, like you guys are saying. And it's like that. And you have to be that person and you have to be such a go-getter and like whatever. And like, I think she's the kind of person who would change it if she could, but she can't, so she's going to make it work, and she's just doing everything that she can to make it work. And I'm kind of like watching her being like, oh, I so hope it works, and I so hope that she, if anyone could do it, she would do it. But that's so hard. Like I just look at that story and like that, my experience of startup, and I'm like, oh fuck, that's hard. Like why would, like how is it possible? And if she can't do it, then maybe no one can do it.
And that comes down to, like, if we look at our funnel narrowing, the realization that it is really hard. It's really bloody hard. It's soul destroying. It's actually soul destroying. I have hard conversations every week with people that they just, don't know how they're going to continue. But, there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. And actually that's something that we're looking at implementing next year, is really, really looking after founder mental health as well, because it's rough. It is rough, yeah.
And also, like, not the legal side, but the accounting side.
Yes.
Because the IRD could be also like a biggest,
Yeah.
threat
to
a startup.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to understand your obligations and make sure that you're meeting them.
So I think maybe as a starter community, they could liaise with, because if somebody's focusing, you're putting energy and your money and everything in there, and you're hoping that one day you could be an exporter, which is going to be making more money for government in return.
Yeah.
Initially, there should be some sort of incentive.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Because
at the moment, there's not many Kiwis who are inventing. Like we're just buying basically.
Yeah.
So if there's a focus of small, like councils and organizations, they want us to be inventors. What is the incentive?
So have you heard of Callaghan Innovation?
No.
Okay, so Callaghan Innovation is the innovation arm, essentially, of MB, so the government. And so they do a lot of funds for research and development. So if you're that way inclined, there is absolutely funding out there for people starting up. So they've got a Getting Started grant. Most of the government money that you will get will be match funded, so you have to have some co-funding. But they do a Getting Started grant. Then they do a research and development grant, and that they might be of varying sizes. And there's also an R&D tax credit as well. So if you have a successful organisation and you're spending money on research and development that meets certain criteria, you can get money back.
It's about 20 grand.
Oh, it could be hundreds of thousands. It depends on what you spend. Yeah.
Just followed conversation here.
Donna, did you have any thoughts on the Americanisms of the co-starter program?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't disagree. I don't think it's look, what it is a really great proven program. Okay, so yes, it is very American. Yes, there's content in there that isn't relevant, but I mean, they've they've used this program for many years and it works really, really well. I absolutely agree. There needs to be something that is a lot more New Zealand centric. So there is a lady called Heidi Renata who has a co-working space here in Dunedin called Innovate HQ. And we talk extensively about having our own sort of startup.
Heidi was our first
journey.
ever guest speaker.
Oh, there you go.
before.
You've met Heidi.
Yeah.
So we talk about that a lot. So what it might look like if we were to write potentially a program for Indigenous cultures, essentially, because she does work in Australia and she does work in Hawaii. So there is conversations that go on about it, that are going on about it. But you know, it's one of those things. I mean, that program would have taken thousands and thousands of hours to write and refine. You know, that sort of stuff doesn't just materialize out of nowhere. So it's about, for us, for Startup Dunedin, it would be about being in the position to have the capacity to put time into something like that. Yeah.
I'm sort of
Be great for this program. Someone needs to do that. Michael?
I'm drawing out sort of three themes
Yeah.
from different points in the conversation.
Yeah.
And some that I'm making my own mental jumps towards.
Sure.
Yeah, but one is, I guess, listening to the group at the start.
Yep.
And their desire to make the world a better place in some way,
Yes.
purpose through their projects. There's the well-being, which founders, that's a real challenge for, but
Yep.
also change makers and
Yep.
people in communities making change is also a recognised challenge.
Yep.
Then we've also got the other consideration that it's not just that we're Kiwis, but we should be responsive to the treaty and that be part of what we do. So it's this kind of mixture of those three things.
Yeah.
How do you think the startup models that are being used in New Zealand actually address those three things?
They don't.
They don't.
Not
So-
in their entirety.
So as a leader in that space, what might be the next steps?
I guess there's probably a lot of conversations going on at the moment around New Zealand in the startup scene around being more collaborative and more community focused. And I think as part of that, there's going to be a bit of a transition to, again, I'm hoping a more altruistic outlook for these separate communities, because at the moment everything's really siloed, and you know that never works for collaborating and moving this sort of stuff forward. But we certainly, I mean, it's certainly something that we actively discuss in our space.
Yeah.
You know, how we can be conscious of people's needs and culture and so on and so forth. But we also have a board and a mandate that we have to kind of stick to. So it's softly.
So this is what the next wave of change.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
At the same time, a lot of big corporates in New Zealand do use American management programs, like Gone Brown, which has helped New Zealand organizations, even in New Zealand and Australia, to achieve wonders.
Yeah.
So then why wouldn't that startup program work so well?
It does work. It absolutely does work, but it doesn't always resonate with the participants because it is very American. You know, so it's about understanding. Yeah.
So how come they're not able to collect, process the systems that?
Well, they absolutely can. So
visualize it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that is what it comes down to. The learning in there applies across the board. It's more the terminology or the lack of reference to anything Kiwi. You know, that's what it comes down to. The tools work, but it could be a lot more New Zealand centric.
You could just change the words, or you can use or change the
Yeah.
words. No?
No, I think they chase us down.
Philippa, you've popped online. Did you have a question?
I guess I had a comment. We had two of the startup weekend organisers that helped with the Pacific one last year, which I was also part of, which was unfortunately really bad. And I would actually argue, and I think from the time I've spent with them in the last couple of weeks, that they found the tools really didn't work.
Right.
They found that the Eurocentrism of it was very much from a scale more, who are your competitors, how do you, and so that the actual language of that very much wasn't, didn't work. And so, they had lots of pondering. So I'm really interested to see where that goes for them, because I think it was a really good, it's a really good opportunity to grow, but to see how that culturally will shift in that Auckland Pacific space.
Yeah.
I have a really I'm very interested. I would like to see what happens here.
Was the Pacific traders?
So we had Anna, what's her last name? And Seka. So what was really interesting about the Pacific one is that they bought their startup team who were all Pākehā, which was really interesting in the sense that Pacific people were like, this is a really new idea, and they needed to move into what that meant. And that bit where you pitch different ideas, just throw things around, there was a real lull.
Yeah.
I think while the communities were kind of like figuring this all out. And so the organisers, I get it, it was good intentions, decided maybe the best thing they could do was fill the space with possible ideas from them.
Yeah.
And so what it did was it just, I think, freaked a bunch of people out. And then they didn't authentically share what they came with, because they were like, oh, maybe this is, and then we were like, and so then the organisers a lot of them are young because they're from the Pacific Business Trust. And their CEO, who was part of it, is now moved on. So I'm hoping that the girls who were kind of younger and starting to lead in that space can feel able to navigate and advocate, because they felt it was really hard to do that. But it was, it's such a cool, we worked our project through there, and actually my sister's in the States working on the project we took through Startup Weekend. So for us, it was a perfect opportunity to test this idea with our communities, and we got such groundswell, we've been able to pick it up. But it was really heartbreaking to see how it didn't work for other parts of our communities. And it was just purely because we came with a different skill set that meant we'd all been through this and churned through it before. But lots of our other people were like, not coming back. And I was like, no, I think there's just big kinks that got to work out. But, it was like good intentions, just really went down the wrong path.
Yeah, and that is an interesting point. So we recently run an event called Waste Jam. I could see Ray wanting to speak about this. We have this amazing facilitator, Ray O'Brien, and another lady, Alice Marsh. So we pulled this event together in about 5 weeks. We decided we'd run like a startup-centric event focusing on waste minimisation. Okay, so we had a room full of people that are very, very passionate about waste minimisation, and had no idea really about startup methodology.
And no need to have it.
No need to. So, there was a few shocked people in the room, I think, is what it comes down to. And we weren't really even that startup centric. You could speak to this better than me.
There was, I think the first bit of feedback I got was when one of the first participants walked in through the doors at the hub. Yeah, and a lady in her 60s looked at me and says, are you organising this? It's well a part of it. She says, what a bloody stupid name. Waste Jam. I make jam. I don't want to waste it. Where's the cafe? And she turned out to be an awesome person and contributed loads to a team.
Yeah.
There was one point when it came to, and it was about pitching. So maybe there's a theme we need to pick up on here. It was the pitch at the end of the weekend of where all of the different teams had got to with their ideas and initiatives to create, to have an impact on how we deal with waste in Dunedin. And we used the same format, the pitch deck format from Startup Weekend. Yeah, and it wasn't actually until, and we've been reasonably responsive over the rest of the weekend, and had quite a loose format compared to a startup weekend, and that we hadn't realised how much we'd moved away from pure startup weekend until we went back to that pitch and we went, oh bugger, this really doesn't work. Yeah. And we got some feedback, gently pointing us in that direction, not so gently. But it was two different cultures, and a process trying to be imposed upon a different culture that we'd allowed. We had made sure there was space for that to be who it was. Yeah. But then we tried to put this one exercise in, and it didn't work.
Boom, boom, didn't work. But it's all about learning, and we got some great feedback out of it. And I think my biggest takeaway would be that if we were to run it again, and we hope to do 3 a year, which will just be different sectors, but is that we need to be a little bit softer, I think, in our approach. Not softer, but we don't want to cram this sort of stuff into a weekend anymore. We think one day where we can get all the hype out of the way and then maybe workshop it for 4 weeks after or something not dissimilar. So not ram it down everyone's throat for 2 days, not that was the intention, but just be a little bit gentler in our delivery.
Yeah. But even Waste Jam was a more personally sustainable version of startup weekend in terms of the amount of work and hours expected on a weekend. So it was already a step up.
Yeah, it was 9 to 5.
Are you happy to talk about that?
Yes.
Yeah. Because these guys might actually have some ideas.
I did pick up on that a little bit earlier when I heard about everybody's ideas.
So there's an exciting project sort of kicking off with Startup Dunedin. I'll pass over to Donna, I guess, to use you as a sounding board on this, I think.
Yeah, cool. So we have recently been awarded some money from the Ministry of Youth Development to run a audacious type program for disadvantaged youth in Māori and Pacifica in Dunedin. So we're looking at 16 to 22-year-olds. And it will be about giving them a bit of a taste of entrepreneurship. So it'll be 6 workshops. There'll be no expectation that they come in with an idea. Again, it's for curious entrepreneurs. And so we're looking at how we might run those at the moment. So any feedback is welcome. We are also looking at giving these guys a qualification post this. So Ray kindly designed us a Startup 101 edge of it. So we're hoping that we'll be able to provide these guys with a micro credential post coming out of this program.
I'm happy to send some feedback that we've got once I've pulled it all together from the summit, because we did a pitch-a-thon. And one of our it was mostly Māori and Pacific who were there. And it was a young Pacific woman who won for her program. And then we've got 4 other girls who've come up and asked for some support from myself and another company post summit around these ideas. So I'm happy to share what their questions and what that's looking like for them, because they're all really capable young people. But the bits that they're missing there are common themes. But we showed everyone the Daniela Puppy Thornton's TED Talk on Herapreneurship. That was my seat, like, watch this first, and then used her impact canvas to try and guide them around what they did, and just ask them for very simple questions to get that out from them. And it was really cool. So I'll like 2 weeks away from pulling all my debriefing together, but I'll flick that to you, Ray, around maybe that Māori and Pacific young people voice.
Amazing, thank you. Any other questions?
Ren, do you have any insights, having been a young Māori female going through one of those programs? You must have insights there that you could help on.
Yeah, I don't know. I was worried that you were going to ask me that.
You don't have to if it's.
And then who is running this?
So we're going to run it. So Startup Dunedin is going to run it. So we will be engaging with who we consider key stakeholders in Dunedin. Like our friends at Otago Polytechnic, University, Ministry of Social Development, Ministry of Youth Development. We've got a couple of schemes down here like Youth Employment Success, iwi. So there'll be a number of key stakeholders in the room to kind of formulate how we fill the bums on seats, essentially. Not that it's about that, but we need to reach corners of Dunedin that we haven't previously had access to.
Even the high schools have specific classes.
Yep.
So you could approach high schools. Because my son at Otago Boys attends his specific groups.
Yeah, nice.
I can give you the person in charge, the contact details if you want.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know Dunedin very well, or like the people. I imagine because of the ages, if they're young people that are at the like polytech, kind of like tertiary.
No, they're non-tertiary, so they're kids that aren't on a pathway to tertiary, essentially. So they might be kids that have left school already and haven't really considered entrepreneurship as an option, being self-employed. So
I imagine if they have people like that they work with already, especially like for the first day or for getting them into like a space where they're comfortable to be, like I think that might be important. I don't know, Philippa.
Yeah, two other things that come to mind would be one are you going to feed them?
Yes.
Yeah. So
we feed everybody.
yeah. And then the other thing would be around, if you're showing examples of what it already looks like, and those examples look like them.
Yeah.
Like whether they're international examples or local ones or national ones, just of people who are actually out there doing it. Because that's the biggest thing I find with so many of our young people. They're just like, when it's people that look like them, they can see that the pathway is possible and that someone has walked it before them.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
If you have any other ideas after this, this is really just a seed stage.
Yeah, absolutely. So anything you can give me, I'm very keen to take it on board, because this is not really something that I guess my board would like us to put energy into, but myself and Rachel, so Rachel runs our Audacious program, are very, very keen to get as many young people, give them a taste of what entrepreneurship could look like. Because these skill sets that you can use for life, essentially. I mean, it might not necessarily start your own business, but I mean, as you know, if they come out a little bit more confident, that's a win for me.
I think that's also really good, like the language that you use around it when you're promoting it to get, when you're attracting them.
Yeah.
And even on the day, like when you're, I don't know how long it is, but when you're talking through that stuff, so that it's not kind of polarizing.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not for me. And because I think.
Same
I think the schedule is really important.
Yeah.
And having really quite well timed like breakouts and like times when they're expected to input. So it's not a one big group discussion all the time.
Yeah. Oh, we're very keenly aware of making sure that it's not a free for all, because we do run Audacious as it stands for tertiary students, which, you know, are similar age groups. So sort of 18 to, actually we've got a 60-year-old at the moment. But yeah, if you let them go off on a tangent, nothing gets done. The big group discussion doesn't work.
And also, I think like the physical space. I don't know if you mentioned where you're running this.
Yeah.
Or if
The distiller. The plan would be to have it in our space, because we want our space to be their space, so that they can come and work there whenever they like. You know, we are open every day. We have tea and coffee, and it's warm. You know, and there's internet. You know, it needs to be a space that they can come to and feel comfortable working. So that's kind of why we choose to have it in our building.
And the way that building's laid out, you wouldn't have to change it too much for it to be like a cafe.
No.
In terms of tables and chairs and different places.
Well, we're running audacious in there now.
Yeah.
Do you have anyone Māori or Pacific who's young helping facilitate the space?
No. I'm keenly aware of that as well.
Yeah.
No or not yet?
I'd like to say not yet, yeah.
And I also flicked down maybe some cool examples of Māori and Pacific people who are doing wicked things in the world in a really diverse space. Like, because I think sometimes everyone goes like, oh, what are our Māori and Pacific are doing? And they kind of put, you know, business or sport, but we've got people doing such diverse, wicked things everywhere that, you know, so that they can see that.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Because, you know, Ochako Boys and Ochako Girls, they run a tuition for Pacifica and Maori students at Messi Hospital.
Oh, yeah.
So every week on Thursdays they run it. It's about, I think about 100 kids that go there, because my son goes.
Yeah.
Then they have presenters that come in as well from
all over the business community.
From our ethnicity.
Yeah.
So you could approach, and the organizer, the teacher from Ochako Boys is here.
Perfect.
He's a young 24, I think.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But he really works really well with the youth in the Pacifica and Maori context.
Awesome. Fantastic.
We've run over time. I wanted to take that opportunity to sound some ideas out.
Thank you very much for your input.
Thanks very much for coming around to us. We're going to have let's just have a quick 5-minute break, leg stretch, breather, fill your cups of tea, finish off your breakfast.
Or your lunch.
And we'll see everybody back in here at 20 past. That would be awesome.
Nice to meet you all.
Thanks, Donna.
See you, Michael.
Where's my mouse? Got a team. How are you? Ding dong, 20 past.
Yeah, right. The most important thing I reckon that wasn't emphasized enough is minimal viable product. When you come up with a great idea, like let's say you're at Waste Jam, you're like, oh, it'd be really cool to make an app for kids, to play some game that teaches them about recycling. You see, that's just too big. One of the biggest skills is downscaling, being able to just keep stripping it down. What is the minimal thing I could make? The minimal thing, absolute. Like you might go through a couple phases of downscaling. You get to some, activity that kids could do where they throw, bean bags and, in bins. And that's gone way down from, an app. So, yeah, I didn't think there was enough emphasis on the power of stripping back several layers to get to your minimal viable product after you've got a problem. And then you're like, yeah, I've got a solution for it. Your solution is way too complex. That's actually your upscaled version. Oh, we're going to have this app and it's going to be amazing. No, that's not how it works. You've missed step 7, 8, 9, and 10. You'll never get to step 11 if you're going to just go straight into trying to make an app, because
Good observation. Good observation.
Yep.
So we've got Julie there and we've got Philippa. I don't think we'll split up into two groups for our follow-up discussion today. I'd love to just hear it here and see what we make of it. So I guess there's a couple of different elements in there. Yeah, and I think if I provide a couple of questions to start, but please don't limit your responses to these 2 questions. Yeah, there was definitely some emotive stuff going on in there, and I'd love to surface that, some good thinking going on. So one is startup methodologies and ecosystems. What can they offer us in bringing our ideas to reality as leaders of change? So I guess the positive side. And then the other one is the limitations and the edges of what those sort of mechanisms could offer us. Yeah, the weaknesses, the gaps. So in some ways, we're doing a bit of a critical evaluation of how startup applies to the context that we are working in. Yeah. So what can they offer us? Or what do they miss? Who'd like first crack at this question?
Yeah, I've got to go first because I spent a whole year over there, basically. So I had a lot of observations.
So what did they offer you for your context for change?
My context was that entrepreneurship is a pathway for leadership for change. Because sometimes the only way you can create change is to make your own, startup.
Yeah.
Because that is definitely one of the pathways to being a change maker. A lot of entrepreneurs are the biggest change makers there are, or disruptors. Not necessarily need to be the main change maker, but if they disrupt, they cause a ripple effect, and sometimes that's enough.
Great, particularly if you look at the social enterprise pathway, and I'm going to offer up near my hometown, Glasgow is a really good example. It's a city that has got its own social enterprise strategy. Yeah, and what they're doing in Scotland to promote social enterprise kind of puts New Zealand to shame a little bit. Yeah, so
yeah.
You're right, there's a pathway. What doesn't it offer for you as a change maker? You're muted, Michael.
Yeah, I am muted because I was just thinking.
Okay.
Just what I have observed is that, as Donna said very clearly, it has become the in thing at the moment. And there is a tendency, if you fall in love with an idea or you want to make a change, that you can become quite egocentric and be the person who wants to create that startup, be that founder, and you'll probably discover, I'd say 99% of the time, someone else is already working on it. And what I noticed was a lot of headbutting because everybody wanted to be the founder, CEO. And I'd say the reason most of those businesses fail is because they're all trying to be the top dog. There's very little teamwork, ironically.
Oh, really?
Everybody wants to be the CEO, the founder, and nobody wants to be, one of the team.
Good observation. You also, while you were there, and this is something that you presented to the class a few months ago, you spoke about how responsiveness to treaty showed up within the startup Dunedin.
Yeah, my observation was because there's Heidi over at Innovate HQ, Startup Dunedin had kind of left that ball in her court. When I brought it up with Audacious, they said that they were planning on using artwork and being bilingual in their presentations, and they'd started to learn Te Reo Māori, and I made a couple suggestions. The two problems that they had, one was about the changes, and I said that GDP doesn't factor in sustainability, and I said the Treaty of Waitangi, I said that if you're a startup that's going to in any way impact the environment, and it's in New Zealand, would you not have to consult iwi? And I also mentioned that the other problem that we have is standing out on a world stage, because what some people haven't figured out yet, when you used to set up a business, you were competing with the guy down the road, you were competing with the guy in your city, maybe even in your country. But now when you get into entrepreneurship, you're instantly dealing on a world scale. So I said that a way to stand out was to actually use Maori heritage, in a respectful way, but you need to double check that you're being respectful, as a way to stand out, using Maori, the bilingual Maori and the artwork for businesses that aren't just to do with the environment and needing to consult iwi if they could impact the environment. I said, that is a really great way to stand out on the world stage. It's a unique, it's a unique, what's it? UVP, unique viable product. I actually thought it was a good branding to use the Maori, but it's in a respectful way.
But you know what happens, Michael? People from different countries who does not really understand, for example, a particular part of Maori culture, can run with it and distort it and destroy it. If you're not careful. I'll give you an example of yoga. The actual yoga is not like meditation, turning your bodies, doing up and down somersaults. That's not yoga. That's only like a fraction of what yoga actually means. But the world has run around. You find so many people who doesn't really understand what yoga is, becoming yoga gurus. So they have distorted it. So
I know what you mean.
So it's so hard sometimes how, maybe you can start with a good intention, but there will be somebody who can, something will come back to New Zealand, which wasn't supposed to be that.
So
you're right.
Can I challenge some of your wording there? Yeah.
Sure.
To find out whether it's just a poor choice of words or whether you need to think about some of the thinking behind the words. Yeah. When you use Maori art, use Te Ao Māori, just in those words, how responsive to the treaty would those actions be?
I think personally it helps give Maori a voice. It identifies them as a important part of New Zealand. If companies,
if you're using an identity, a piece of art, an image, the words, you're using them. Is that you giving a voice or taking it away?
Well, I, in my opinion, feel like it's giving a voice, as long as it's been consulted with Maori, as long as you do everything with their approval. It's not something you're doing without their approval. And if at any stage they feel like that it's not how they want to be represented, you cut it. I just think if you were making, for example, one of the things I've always wanted to see exist is a virtual tour guide. And I thought if you had a virtual tour guide in an autonomous vehicle, most people think apps, but apps are actually the next newspapers. There's a startup in New Zealand called Soul Machines, and they have digital humans. And in the Teslas now, they have screens in cars, and all future cars they all have screens. And I thought that if you made a digital human, would it not make sense to have it as a Maori? And I also thought that's a very large scale. If you take it down to a minimal viable product, let's say you just made it as an app that kids downloaded on their phone and they could play a digital I Spy in their car, you'd use some Maori artwork. The way that you would illustrate it would be incorporating the artwork. And also, if you're doing the history of New Zealand, it'd be very important that you are explaining Maori heritage. I thought that's the perfect thing. Don't take them to Cadbury's World. Cadbury's World isn't teaching them anything about, that's...
I'm going to go back to the words you're using again. Yeah? And you're still coming back to use. Yeah, you may have consulted, but you are using it as opposed to working with, in partnership with. Yeah.
Good terminology. Yes, you'd have a partnership with.
So there is perhaps some subtleties in the language.
Yes,
but
I'm not using the right words.
But I think if anytime you say use Maori anything, there's a whole load of other thinking that needs to happen in there, not just about have I consulted, but actually am I authentically engaging with the concepts of partnership.
Well, the way I see it, Ray, is if you do a tour thing at the moment, where's it going to take you? It's going to take you to the Albatross Centre. It's going to take you to the railway station. It's going to take you. It used to take you to Cadbury's World, or Baldwin Street. What I'm saying is, the app that I'd make would actually really talk about Maori history and heritage, and it would teach tourists about the belonging to the land and the identity that the Maori has with the land and their ancestors, where they lay. And that would be a much less commercialized version of the tours that most people receive now. So if Maori didn't find that a nice, respectful representation, then you'd just respect that and you'd walk away from it, and you'd
and I think the first thing should be that we start using we. I think that's the first thing Maoris do.
Yes.
And no offense, Michael, but in your language sometimes you use a lot of I's, and it's not really, I think, Maori. No, I think, I don't know.
Yeah. What I'm saying is that also I can understand why Maoris are underrepresented. If they make it too difficult for businesses to actually try and work with them, of course they're going to abandon it. They're going to make it too difficult because.
So Michael,
something. Yes.
Philip has just given you a link in the chat box there for some good examples of working with, as opposed to using.
Can I just also pick, so Vaka Interactive work with Te Papa, and they're seen as a cutting edge technology in terms of Māori doing their storytelling. Also, most of my friends, I've got a lot of friends who are in the business of storytelling who are Māori. And one of the things that we are always hearing from our Pacifica Māori people is that we don't need anyone to ask permission to use our culture, because we've explicitly said, and communities of colour have explicitly said, what we require is space to do it ourselves. And so
Okay,
there's,
then.
you know, like I think that there's enough information out there currently that our communities are tired. But I'm happy to actually post some links maybe of stuff that I've got friends who've done here, I've got friends who've done the Pacific, and maybe.
Oh, you're frozen.
Sorry, I'm getting frozen.
That's all right.
But
Yeah,
Mahuku, the program, and Vaka Interactive have come from people who were tired of other people telling their stories. And it was not that they ever lacked the ability to do this. What was found throughout this process, and especially with Vaka Interactive, is that they weren't even getting to the table because other people were too busy being at the table taking up that space.
Well, that's fine. I'm
so
not a big developer company, and I never will be. That's not my plan at all. My plan is to be able to create a way of recording real learnings. That's my.
And I wasn't talking about anyone personally. I guess what my thing is we all make mistakes in terms of and need to have education in terms of how we decolonize the way we work. Like you either have a plan to decolonize, because people go, hey, I'm going to work with Te Tiriti or Waitangi, but another big part is we have to work with, like, that's still a colonized model. So it's still a colonized model that was forced on Māori, and so there's this whole thing around, well, what's our plan, not just to abide by Te Tiriti or Waitangi, but what's our plan to make sure that our actions are being decolonized? And I wasn't talking at you personally, Michael, that Vaka Interactive stuff was just stuff around, that's what Mahuku is doing. And I think those communities are more than happy to have you come and sit and learn, and to say, like, hey, this is my idea. But I think what communities are tired of is when we're being asked for people to be consulted.
Oh, you're frozen again.
It just takes space away from the voices that are there.
It's good to understand that. It just seems sometimes like, you come up with an idea, like nobody has ever thought of turning Google Maps from the fastest route into the most scenic route. As far as I'm concerned, that's intellectual property. So you come up with an idea, and then you think, well, where would you test it? You test it in New Zealand. So you go, that's a great idea. So you then think, I would like to incorporate the Maori artwork into those things, and then you realise that the Maori find that offensive. Oh, that makes it difficult because you don't want to offend anybody.
So I'm going to take us back to Donna's talk, and there's more ground to cover there.
That just makes it difficult. That'll be why companies are.
So I'm taking it back to Donna's talk, and the things that startup can offer us, and the things that startup can't. Ren, you're having a chuckle. Tell us about it.
Unmute.
I'm not ready.
Okay, Chucky, how about you?
I'd rather pass it for the moment.
What is it?
Passing.
Oh,
Sorry. Okay, Ray. Yes. What was the question? What can start help us with, and what it cannot?
Yeah.
I think there's a space for startup. I think actually as well, Ness, that I'm that person. Like if I had an idea that I cared enough about, that I think was a good enough idea that I could create something, with. Like when I did the co-starters course, it all actually spoke to me. Like I could be in that world, but I don't want to. So I don't, like, it's not for everyone. And even if you like fit in that box of, you can be a go-getter, or like not even a go-getter, what is it? But if I felt so strongly about something, because I think that it's really important to know how much work goes into a startup. And so I think if I had an idea that I believed in, like, wholeheartedly, I would work my ass off to make it happen. And I think that it's possible. But like Ness said, I think that's the model that it is now, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I don't have an idea, and it's not attractive to me to go and work my ass off and make it happen, because that's what you have to do to make. I'm like, I'd rather go and work Yeah, because also as well, like this, the co-starters, you know, like ultimately it comes down to money, and money is like, yeah, hashtag Tony Robbins. Yeah, I think me and Tony Robbins would be great friends. And Ness, me, Ness, and Tony Robbins, best friends forever. But I think, yeah, like the money, it ultimately comes down to money, and you know, there's that whole accounting side of it and all that, and it just kind of gets pretty gross at some stage. I'm like, I don't care that much like about that. I'd rather go, you know, and that's why we work in community, and that's why we recycle, even though recycling isn't going to save anyone. Whatever. Okay, I've said my piece.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Tony. Over to Ness now.
Yeah, no, that was great. Thanks, Ren. Yeah, although I speak about Tony Robbins, I think he also has some great things to gift. I thought that was a really good conversation, and it's quite nice I felt the kind of the energy of it change as you know, more questions came into it, and I think like bringing on that, I know I started it, you know, bringing quite a challenging outlook on what is happening within that space, because I guess I've witnessed it. You know, Ray said I've moved between different co-working spaces. I talk to people who are part of startups, and yeah, the idealized culture of it. So yeah, thanks Philippa for those resources. I can't wait to watch that heropreneurship piece. I think it's so valuable, and even what Ren said about going into community stuff instead, it's that collective impact rather than idolizing these new creative ideas that actually never turn into fruition. And I wonder how we can support more of the ideas out there that have already got some kind of traction, and how to actually support those ideas to really turn into their full fruition, instead of putting all this energy into thinking like you can have your own idea and start something great. But kind of Michael also touched on, there's so many good ideas out there. It doesn't need to be, you know, reinventing the wheel, as they say. So yeah, as a collaborator, I find no interest in the startup space until they open up for different personality types. And yeah, I would just also feel like there's so much energy and resources, i.e. funding, that goes up into supporting these kind of projects. And I wonder about all the other people who feel disheartened because they're working in places that their values aren't aligned, because they can't see a pathway to connecting to work where values and purpose does align, unless you choose to be the founder mentality, and then it's an authentic pathway, and maybe one with judgment for the self. And I'm basing this kōrero on my own experience, thinking like, is that how you get there, is to be a founder? And then I'm like, fuck that. The end.
Okay, so I guess we're identifying some really big weaknesses in the whole.
Why don't we hear other people talk?
Yeah. Well, we're finding some real big weaknesses in what startup offers. What should it look like? Go, Steffi. Yeah.
I don't know if I can quite respond to that. I'll go back to the original question.
Yeah.
I think I will say I came in a little bit like cynical, because maybe similar to others, I have seen, I guess the startup people in the networks that I know take on big things and big promises with and find money for it, and can't necessarily deliver on what that is, and that can create hurt in the spaces they're in. But what I will say is positive, is a willingness to like review and change things and stick at something, even like, and to recognize that sometimes that they might have done something they couldn't follow through on. I didn't feel like she super sold like why, like she was saying it works, but didn't really help me understand why it works or what. Like I didn't really feel like I could latch onto something there that resonated. And I think it was good that she recognized that there's this kind of throw so much of yourself into mentality, and it comes through in like community development too. And that sits really uncomfortably, like this narrative that you've got to destroy yourself for something to be successful. I think, I don't know. Yeah, those are my thoughts.
And Julie's there as well.
Can I make an add-on to that? I wonder, in terms of like the interconnectedness of everything, that narrative that you have to waste your body, your natural resources, in order to create business is similar to how we waste the Earth's natural resources to create business.
Yeah, like it doesn't really solve that. It just transfers where that happens. Mm.
And also, I think that idea of going global, like not everybody has an interest of making it to international market. You know, can we not be happy with just making things for Kiwis? Why are we successful only if we're exporting?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Like, I mean, can we not survive without exporting? I mean, that's my thing.
And Julie, share your thoughts.
I also don't have a whole lot of interest in the kind of social enterprise world because of a lot of what lots of people have been saying. But having said that, I have just done a social lean canvas through a kind of an accelerator program called 9Wire, with a whole lot of different organizations that want to kind of like intensively, there's 10 spots for groups to be intensively mentored through a kind of startup program. So we're still yet to hear back from that. But in doing that application, I went through a social lean canvas, which I hadn't done before. So like I don't know, there's some good parts about it, but I still just have quite a lot of trouble with the kind of growth mindset and what Ness was saying of just like changing, of using humans as like a I don't know, an untapped resource to just be mined. Like, I mean, it would be cool if within the social enterprise world, things were actually being done differently to look after people's well-being and just kind of, I don't know, just have a different outlook towards it rather than just the same old kind of growth. I'd just like to see a little bit more of the kind of human aspect and looking at it seems like a really awesome chance to do something differently, but it doesn't sound healthy enough for me.
Can I just add on to that, a rumination I'm currently having around, like I've got a social enterprise and I've had my company for 3 years, and I think we get real stuck on structure because we have to be like, not we have to be, but everyone's like, you're either a non-profit or you're a business that calls yourself a social enterprise because you want to operate within the community sector, but there's no other thing. And so I'm seeing more and more this blurring of people who are just like going, I don't want to be there. So they're just being people who do stuff until they kind of hit a road where they've got to get funding or get an invoice or something like that. But something I find really interesting around unpacking this space is, did I hear her right that she said they're a non-profit? So startups are non-profit as structure, as they operate, did she say? Like they've got a board.
They have a board, yeah. I'm not sure what their actual legal entity is. I think it's a trust.
And then Arkina, right, as well, do amazing work, but they're also a non-profit. And so I've currently, one of my real big thinkings is around because there's this whole thing around lots of unpacking around, well-being and sustainability and how we work. and the people who are talking about it or are heading in this space around social impact and social enterprise and community impact, it goes back to the structure and money. And I kind of wonder, well, some of those leading thinkers are all still non-profits. So like, who are the, like for me, I'm like, who are the social enterprises or the businesses who are acting in this way that I can look to? Because the people who are kind of trying to give advice in the sectors I'm operating in, I'm like, cool, I get it, but you're not walking that road. Like you're a non-profit, so and I'm not sure. Again, I'm just ruminating because I'm not sure if I'm like how I feel about it, or if I kind of it makes me feel like maybe there's not as much validity in what they're saying because they're not on that path. I may not be very clear about what I'm saying. It's just a current thing that I'm really trying to figure out, that all these startups and Akina and everyone are non-profits themselves, but are preaching how to walk this other way, but they're not doing it.
And also that funnel dropping like 1 out of 100, being successful. And I thought that data, if you become so clued in the data, then you would, when you start running, you would have already conceived that maybe out of this many people did not, like they're not going to be successful. So how much effort would they be putting in? Because is it really there to help, or is it just therefore get funding from DCC? Because if it's only 1 out of 100, and that's what the history of how many years they've been doing it, so deep down, how enthusiastic would you be? Thinking, here you go, a bunch of another idiots come through. Is it there for just a tick in the box, or are they there to really make you successful? And do they stick so much in validation of their success rate?
So I know that so for example, when they're pitching for their funding, the number of successful businesses is only part of the pitch. The skills and capabilities people develop as they are working through often failed projects is part of the pitch, and that's why the university and Polytech put some money in. Yeah. So it's part of the reason. Yeah.
Okay, I found a positive.
Yeah.
Like normalizing failure. I think in other spaces that I've been in, that's not like, you've got to not fail at any cost, and so normalizing that as part of the natural process, I think that's valuable. I could learn from that.
I definitely think like there's lots of skills and capabilities and competencies that are learned in that process, and especially because it is normally accelerated, you're learning them at such a fast pace. Like even the few people in this room who mentioned that they'd been in it learnt heaps from that process, and I think anyone would. And you're also getting an insight into a whole different community world way of thinking, which could be really good as well, linking up to different networks.
Great. So as an overall thought for startup to be applicable to the type of changes and the ideas that you guys are growing, and putting into application, it would have to be quite a radically different approach to an incubation, to an accelerator. Does that give me some facial nods or shakes, or the current format isn't what is needed for what the changes you want to make? No? Cool. All right. What I would love to hear your thoughts on, and this might be something that continues on Facebook, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what would that look like? Yeah, what would the equivalent, what startup offers some of those for-profit, let's get an app produced business ideas? What would the same body, the same function be for the types of ideas that you guys are wanting to turn into reality? Yeah, so that's a question to leave you with, and I'd love you to perhaps put some thoughts on the Facebook forum or on the when I post this up on Mural, whichever location suits you best. Yeah, but what would it look like if you were to re-envision startup so that fitted our needs here? What would it look like? Yeah. So we are at 4 minutes to, which is our time up. Would anybody like to close the session for me?
I have a quote I could share.
Yeah.
It sits above my bed. I don't know how related it is, but take from it what you will. Our goal could be to live life in radical amazement, to get up in the morning and look at the world in a way that takes nothing for granted. Everything is phenomenal. Everything is incredible. Never treat life casually. To be spiritual is to be amazed. And that's by Abraham Joshua Heschel.
Fine. Thank you for sharing that.